Hi, everyone. I'm Ron Seaver, president of the National Sports Forum. We want to welcome you to today's webinar. It's called Leveling Up, Selling Blue Chip Brands on Growing Sports. Our moderator is going to be Dan Hall. Dan is the strategy lead of media partnerships and sponsorships for FloSports. And he's going to be leading a discussion on how growing sports and media properties can capitalize on their momentum and then can create unique value propositions that entice partnerships from top industry brands and drive revenue from partnerships. Now, before I hand this over to Dan, obviously a couple housekeeping notes here. I wanted to let you all know that if you like the content that you're hearing today, we have another webinar coming up on Tuesday, December 20th. That's going to be starting at 1 p.m. That's a Tuesday, December 20th, 1 p.m. That's 10 a.m. Pacific, titled How the Detroit Tigers and Red Wings Sponsorships Fly Higher in Digital Partnership Management, covering the impact of digitizing sponsorship management efforts. And also, of course, if you want to join the Forum Family Live, get a chance to meet us all live. We're only 80 days out from the National Sports Forum Conference. It's going to be February 26th to the 28th, and it's located in Los Angeles this year. We're bringing the forum to Los Angeles with LAFC and SoFi Stadium, Hollywood Park, YouTube Theater as our hosts. You get a chance to go behind Bank of California Stadium, and certainly the Budweiser Gala will be over at SoFi Stadium and YouTube Theater over there at Hollywood Park. So get your badges now before prices go up. They go up after January 15th, and you can do that certainly by visiting www.sports-forum.com for more information. So that's it for my housekeeping notes. So let's get down and get into what we're going to be talking about today. Again, leveling up, selling blue chip brands on growing sports. As I mentioned, our moderator is going to be Dan Hall, and he's going to be leading the discussion. He's the strategy lead of media partnerships and sponsorships for FloSports. Now, joining him on our panel will be longtime forum friend Cory Bernstine, VP of Strategy at the United Soccer League, and Jennifer Neumann, Vice President of Sponsorship Management at US Bank. Now, for Dan, I'll do a quick intro. Dan has been a part of the Forum family for quite some time. He literally was a student when he first came to his first forum in the 2014 Case Cup. He was with the University of Oregon, the Mighty Ducks there, competing in the 2014 Case Cup competition, and he's been attending forum events ever since. Professionally, he's worked at GMR Marketing, the Portland Trail Blazers. He spent some time in the nonprofit world, and currently, he's based in Austin, leading partnership strategy for FloSports, which is a fast-growing sports media company that focuses on giving fans of non-tier one sports access to live events of coverage of sports they love. Now, should you have any questions, you'll see it on your bottom screen. There's a Q&A box there that you can write questions in. So we want to hear what your questions might be. We'll hopefully carve out some time at the end to give you an opportunity to address those questions. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the floor over to Dan. Dan, it's all yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Ron, and thanks for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Really excited to be leading this webinar today, and thanks so much to everyone who is tuning in live or watching on demand after the fact, and special thanks to the National Sports Forum for the opportunity and for organizing this, and also to our panelists, Cory and Jen, for being a part of the session today. I think we've got a great session in store. Cory, Jen, and I had a prep call earlier this week, and they've got just lots of great insights that I think are going to help just bring edification to this topic and drive new ideas and inspiration, and really help all of us learn how to best capitalize on opportunities to differentiate if you're a rights holder and trying to sell sponsorship, how to differentiate your story to prove scale and to come up with out of the box ideas to help think bigger and help find blue chip brands who may not be you may not be top of mind for, but there's a lot of opportunity for them to reach your audience and hit a different audience in a way that it might be different from what they may be thinking about by trying to sell if they were pursuing partnerships with the top level league like the NBA or the NFL or the NHL or one of those big blue chip properties. And then if you're on the brand side, learning like, hey, there's more out there than just the top level blue chip media platforms and sports rights holders. There's lots of opportunities to hit your audience in a unique way and tell your story in a differentiated method. And Cory and Jen come from great backgrounds and great partnership experiences. And I think you're going to bring a lot of interesting points to the conversation. So I'll go ahead and bring them up now. Cory and I have worked together and known each other for several years. Our days go back to past lives when I was at GMR Marketing and he was at minor league baseball. I'm sure we'll get more into that as the conversation goes on. And Jen and I are new friends, just met recently, but have lots of mutual current and past colleagues in common, and really excited for you to get to hear from her as well. Ron gave a little bit of a background on me, but I want to turn it over to our two star panelists today, Cory and Jen, to have the opportunity to introduce themselves, talk about their backgrounds, and kind of where they are in their career now and what their main focus is at the current state of their career. Jen, do you want to kick us off just introducing yourself and your background?
Sure. Thank you, Dan. Hi, guys. Thanks for joining today. As Dan said, my name is Jennifer Neumann. I'm a sponsorship manager at US Bank. I have been with US Bank for about 15 years in the marketing department, about 9 years in sponsorships. And one of my key reasons I'm here today is I manage the WNBA sponsorship portfolio for US Bank. Cory, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, delighted to be here. And thanks again to Ron, Mel, and the NSF crew and doing what you do for this community. So Cory Bernstine, a Florida native, adjunct professor at University of South Florida, a proud girl dad of a 1-year-old who likes to party and not sleep. But more importantly, head up the strategy at the USL. Prior to that, I spent 7 years at MILB headquarters, building and growing the commercial and marketing team for the league and our 100+ clubs, which led to an opportunity with the USL, which is the largest and fastest growing soccer league in North America. And scope is really, simply put, auditing where we currently are and leading the major initiatives, charting out the course of where we want to go as an entity, all through the lens of driving fandom and revenue. So delighted to be here. And Dan, I'll give it back to you.
Awesome. A few of the key takeaways that we're hoping to you'll gain from this experience are learning how to capitalize on organizational growth to drive momentum and revenue from partners if you're on the property side, and learning how to differentiate yourself through unique storytelling in a way that attracts prestigious partner brands, learning how to create and demonstrate reach and scale, and really gaining inspiration from innovative examples and best practices for putting top level partnerships together. And so looking forward to getting into those topics today. And why don't we kick it off with Cory? You mentioned some of your background with minor league baseball and USL, similar organizations in terms of being governing bodies of leagues at a national level. Tell us about kind of what got you interested in those two opportunities, and yeah, what kind of attracted you to that, and what have you learned from those experiences so far in your career?
Yeah, for sure. So I think first and foremost, it was very much an inward-looking process, and some of these that I'll rattle off here were a little bit less tangible when I was going through the process of where to go in the career. But aside from kind of putting aside what's best for the family, there's a couple of things that attracted me to those two specific opportunities. One is working with incredibly talented people to build something. Two is every day you have an opportunity to do something for the first time ever. Three, there's an opportunity to truly impact the sport. You know, USL is a kind of a steward of the game that can shape the future of soccer in this country, like no one can. And that's a really unique opportunity. And then four is kind of like, how can I be challenged? You know, I went from baseball, where I played in college and very much knew the sport and the nuances, to, you know, moving to soccer, where there was definitely some Ted Lasso moments of the educational process. But I think what's important is having the intentionality to learn the nuances of the sport, but also embrace, kind of for myself, a little bit of this diversity of thought and experiences to kind of complement, you know, some of the incredibly talented people here. So I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of transferable skills that take shape, and how you build a commercial team, you know, one that's focused on an aspirational vision and ownership platforms and storytelling. I think a big thing that carried through is the importance and direct effect that having a community and fan first lens to everything that you do really stands for, because both of those entities are very much community oriented. And I think lastly, Dan, it's really about kind of having a student of the game mentality of, you know, whether it be it's a 100-year-old company that has a lot of tradition and history, or at the USL, we're in our current iteration of about 11 years in, there's always a need to evolve and innovate. So a lot of similarities, but a lot of differences in a good way.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And you mentioned to me off the record but I'm going to make it on the record that you said you started out at USL with the Ted Lasso level knowledge of soccer, and now have improved to Coach Beard level, which I think is an improvement. But talk about as you've kind of learned more about the game and the sport and the league with USL, how have you gone about educating prospective partners who may not be as familiar with the sport of soccer on kind of what the opportunity is from a commercial standpoint?
Yeah, I think for, we're in a little bit of a unique space where soccer continues to rise in growth and popularity, evident by, the men's national team and the World Cup going on currently, which I feel is great for the sport and all the properties involved. So what often comes down to is you're talking to a brand that might have a preconceived notion of what soccer is. And so phase one is really an educational process about the league itself, but also our unique positioning within the broader soccer and sports ecosystem. And we've been working with this with Legends, who we have a long-term partnership with, and we're really crafting that story. So some of the things that have been effective that resonated with brands is, one, you got to stand for something. At MLB, it was all about fun. Here, it's about uniting communities through soccer. So that really helps the alignment process when you're going out and prospecting. Another interesting one is just the value prop. The opportunity, our national partnership platform is kind of in its early stages. So there's more opportunity and less clutter in a massive canvas to kind of really carve out in terms of share of voice, in terms of ownership platforms for companies to come in. And then I think, a big one is obviously reach and scale. We got 200 plus markets that we cover and a lot of enterprise-wide value, but I think that also comes with how do you harness that? So we kind of created this integrated sales model where with one fell swoop, we can streamline a national deal that also includes local clubs that are important to the brand. So I think it goes back to your question of educational is phase one, but phase two is then how can you actually leverage the platform to drive business value? And definitely not Coach Beard. My soccer career ended when I was like 2 years old, but I'm slowly getting there.
That's awesome. Yeah, thanks for that insight. Jen, you referenced your management with US Bank of their WNBA partnership, which is a new partnership for you guys, I think just launched this past season. Would love for you to talk through, similar to what I just asked Cory, but what was your familiarity with the WNBA prior to starting this partnership, and then maybe what was that education process like for you in terms of the business opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely. Being incredibly candid, I was not very familiar with the WNBA. I knew they were a league. I know the NBA is a league, but where I live, we do not have the NBA or the WNBA. So it's not as in our face as MLB is or NCAA basketball or NFL is. So we started working with our agency, GMR, that we work with, great agency, for a couple different national opportunities. And the WNBA was one of the national opportunities that we were looking at. I was honestly skeptical about everything because with my background in sponsorships, we were very focused on impressions and what do the spots and dots look like. And if you were to put the WNBA next to an organization like the NFL, you're not going to get the same output. So I'm lucky enough to work under Chris Lee, who's very good at training us to look at, let's turn our lens this way and say, okay, we're not going to do this. We're going to do this from a deal standpoint. And we're going to do a purposeful activation with a sponsorship. So we're going to try to be making a change through our sponsorship dollars versus just getting those media impressions, those social media impressions. And what can we actually do for good? And that's where we started looking at the WNBA Changemaker partnership as a different lens for sponsorships at US Bank. So Chris had to win over not just myself and my manager and our teammates, but then work to sell it up to our upper management. So being a WNBA changemaker for US Bank has really changed the way we look at sponsorships for US Bank.
That's
Those are
awesome.
a
Yeah,
few
thanks
questions.
for giving that background. You guys can see a poll question that just popped up around your own exposure to the WNBA this season. Obviously, a growing sport, growing fan base, and growing reach and scale across their platforms and channels. Interested to know kind of what the fandom is among the audience here today. Jen, talk a little bit more about that process. Like, what did the WNBA sales team do to really position the opportunity to really tell that story and show how it could be a beneficial platform for US Bank, even though it was so different than what you guys have done in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. So they kept honing in on us being a purposeful partner, us being a change maker. They kept honing in on giving us a platform to reach out to the players, to reach out to the needs the players might have on a financial area. So a lot of times when you partner with teams, it's difficult to breach that area of being able to actually talk face to face with players. And they kept communicating that, hey, you will get to financially educate these players. You'll get to meet with them one-on-one and learn what they are struggling with financially, and how we can help actually change the athlete's life and actually change these young women's life in helping coach them in all of their financial needs. So that was a big piece of it. So it wasn't just, yes, we're going to give you US Bank these media impressions, we're going to give you these commercial spots, et cetera, but we're also going to let you come in and talk to a rookie class. We're going to let you partner with Project Destined to help coach these young women as they go through high school and college. We're going to give you this other platform to help give these young athletes exposure versus just the TV spots, the commercial spots, et cetera. And it really tied in nicely with our shared DEI efforts at the bank.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. And yeah, and I mentioned this to you when we chatted earlier this week, but love the commitment to the direct interaction and support of the athletes versus just a donation to the cause or a charitable gift. And I imagine at the WNBA level, that's an access that a brand has that maybe you wouldn't have at the NBA level or the NFL or the MLB in terms of the direct access to working with the athletes and spotlighting them and what you're doing. And so maybe that's a takeaway for our audience today is for rights holders who aren't at that kind of tier one, kind of top 5 sports league level. That's an opportunity is giving brands access and connection to athletes that they may not get with other types of partnerships. But yeah, thanks for sharing that. Cory, listening to what Jen has shared, what kind of resonates with you in terms of best practices, ways that you guys at USL or in your past life at minor league baseball have really helped kind of position opportunities to top tier brands that may not be as familiar with the property?
Yeah, I think specific to Jen, I would definitely do a little hat tip because it was fundamentally, Jen's been there for 15 years, right? It fundamentally changed and shifted their strategy towards, how do we make this a true partnership and have working dollars that have an impact? I think some things that resonate with me is, one, the partnerships that are usually the best are ones where you're done talking, you give them the pitch, the brand comes back, is like, okay, this is great, but how can we help you? What do you want to accomplish? So I think the purposeful platform and partnership was a really good takeaway for me, and something that, at USL we're definitely striving to do. Given, there's a few case studies that we have, but it's very much so the mutually beneficial partnerships. And it goes back to kind of standing for something. I think that helps identify partners that buy into the long-term vision of your property, and the W just kind of building the change makers platform to really get institutional partners that will activate that and create change, honestly. So fitting the name.
Yeah, that's great. And from your standpoint, maybe what are some ways that you guys have prospected or kind of found effective to find those brands like a US Bank who might be interested in opportunities with MILB or with USL?
Yeah, so prospecting is an interesting one, and again, it's timely. We just kind of wrapped this up with our partners at Legends, but it's very much an art and science. I think the science comes from, or the foundational comes from, understanding your audience, your community, demographics, psychographics, behavioral consumption patterns, brand sentiment, and kind of reverse engineering and building on top of that, certain filters, right? So some of these are not new probably to this group or this audience, but what brands are investing in the sport and have demonstrated, at least internally, that soccer is something that they have circled on their books and invested in. What brands are currently blocked due to incumbents and other maybe properties. I think an interesting one, given our reach and scale, is kind of these top to top connections, where given our market reach, we've had several Fortune 500 companies that are located in one of our markets have a deal with our club, had a positive experience, and then that kind of uplifted into kind of a national structure. So that one's been pretty interesting and fruitful for us. The other prospecting I think is important is looking at the totality of purchasing, buying, and power. We'll have $2 billion worth of stadium development over the next 4 or 5 years. That's a lot of new, I think, categories and brand companies that could be involved in the process. So you go with the filters, and then there's a little bit of a scorecard measurement to your point, Dan, and what Jen alluded to is identifying brands that are leveraging their platform for an impact, such as US Bank, brands that are truly activating partnerships via marketing and media dollars to bring the IP to life. And I think an interesting one is kind of this consumer marketplace sentiment. What's the brand equity when you put those two logos together, announcing the partnership? What's kind of the equity transition that takes place, positive and or maybe neutral? So being intentional about what the marketplace, how they view the brands, is kind of like in the scorecard development that we developed on top of those kind of filters.
Yeah, appreciate you kind of giving that insight and kind of behind the curtain of, what's the process? What do you guys go after, and kind of what does your approach look like? We have a question for you from the audience, Cory. I'm going to put you on the spot. It's what is your strategy to connect with US Hispanic fans and community? Do any brand partners look to the USL to connect with that community?
Yeah, for sure. So obviously the natural inclination is definitely a strong tie to the endemic nature of the sport with this community. But also what I've learned is that it's not a one size fits all approach. And so given our market reach, it was important for us to understand, the California, Texas, Floridas are great and predominantly maybe Mexican American, but there's also the Omahas, the Forward Madisons, the Charlotte, where there's actually a burgeoning Hispanic community. So we've wrapped our arms around that. I think from a brand perspective, we have players from 80 different countries. So using them as vehicles to authentically connect with kind of their national origins and Spanish-speaking communities has been one avenue. The other one really was to identifying brands that have a strong brand equity with that Hispanic consumer has been important for us, where there's a little bit of a trade-off. So that's another one. And then our media partner who wants to promote and activate it around it. So we're having further discussions for 23 about some big plans, but those are just a few kind of mechanisms that we're looking to do from a national and local perspective.
Yeah, that's great. And hopefully our audience here got some good takeaways from that around, or understanding your markets, where can you reach that consumer most effectively? Who are the athletes that can really authentically speak to a certain demographic or consumer that you can leverage? And then, how do you work with brand partners who already have an audience there to kind of build mutually beneficial fan engagement and reach platforms and opportunities? Jen, you gave some great insight on the US Bank platform and activation around, or kind of more the background of why you guys decided to do the deal, why it made sense from a brand standpoint, how it was different from what you've done in the past, but maybe get a little more granular with us and tell us kind of what are all the different ways you guys have activated the partnership and really seen results for your business?
Sure. Thank you for the question. I think one of the biggest things we've done is, like we said, when we signed on to be a changemaker partner, we said we're going to work with different teams in the bank to educate these players. So we started with the day after they were drafted. We took the newly drafted class and we had our financial advisors meet with the women and learn what do they need to know. Now, we learned a bit that the day after the draft is never a good idea. They're exhausted, they're tired, they're excited, etc. So we've taken learnings like that to then adjust for next year, that we will not be meeting with the new rookie class the day after the draft. But we learned great insights from them on how they need guidance on their dollars. For a lot of these young women, this is their first paycheck they've ever had. That was a learning insight. So maybe if we had a financial platform that was kind of at a certain level here, we need to tone it down for the rookie level to be here. When we meet with, say, a group of athletes that have been in the league for 2 to 3 years, we've had insights from them that it's, hey, we're paying taxes in different states. Every state we play in, we pay taxes. So we really spent this year, and huge kudos to our financial ed team. When they met with the players, they guided them in everything they could, and then they took all of the information they learned from them, and we're using that to hone in on our educational platform that we will provide to them then in 2023. So to me, it is huge kudos to that team that we gave them the platform, we gave them information, but we literally took the time to learn what they want to learn about and how we can truly help empower them through their finances to excel in the future, and then continue to build out that platform in 2023 and 2024, et cetera. So I think like that's one big piece of it, is that financial piece, because that is what we promised to do as a change maker partner. And we have put our money where our mouth is on that. And then secondly, as far as, and Cory mentioned this earlier, whenever we sign on to a sponsorship at US Bank, we look at it like a mutually beneficial partnership. We treat our partners like they're our coworkers, like they're our family. And I know that's cliche, but we really do. And we put our money where our mouth is, and we literally try to figure out different areas we can partner with that will help both of us. So the WNBA started All-Star Game Live this year. It's their first year they've done it. They've had the All-Star Game, but this is their first year they did All-Star Game Live. And they wanted a presenting partner. And anytime, everyone knows, anytime you sign on to doing something brand new and sponsoring something brand new, it's kind of a gamble. But we trusted them. They trusted us. We said, we'll do this. So it was WNBA All-Star Game Live presented by US Bank. Of course, we always have a few glitches here and there, but it worked out great. And I think it helped show them that we're a one-year partner, and we're already willing to put additional dollars and additional manpower behind sponsoring this. And I think it helped build a trust factor between us with the W and the W with us. So I think those are the two of the biggest areas that stand out for me as our first year as a change maker partner.
Awesome. That's great. And tell us about, so obviously you did the financial education and coaching and training, did the experiential WNBA Live partnership. Is there anything that you've done from like a content standpoint to really tell those stories or to scale kind of what those individual experiences looked like and help a broader audience be able to see them?
Yeah, we started with, we have a social media series that you can see on our social media platform that went through a bit of the content series that we sponsored with them, as well as if you look at the Changemaker report that the W published, it has content on that as well. And that's one very big area that we're hoping to build out in 2023 as well, building out on those different stories.
Awesome. And then just in terms of a measurement standpoint, I'm sure the KPIs were different, and the way that you proved, hey, was this successful or not, was different. And obviously you must have thought it was successful since you signed on for additional investment, it sounds like, with the WNBA Live. But what do those KPIs look like, and how do you determine success with this partnership?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it kind of goes back into the beginning with the KPIs. This is where myself especially had to really kind of turn my lens to a different way, that it wasn't going to be the traditional KPIs that you have. Yes, we're measuring social, we're measuring TV, we're measuring all the spots and dots, as we say. But it is even more the purposeful activation piece. How many people are participating? How many people are talking about it? How many people are, even internally, employee-wise, clicking on internal stories that we have and sweepstakes that we have, and being excited and feeling like, oh my gosh, like I'm a mother of a girl, and she's so excited to see that we're sponsoring the WNBA. And then we then take all of that information and we package it up, as I mentioned, to sell to even our leadership higher up. So we focus on this for this sponsorship less than the actual hard numbers. We track them because, of course, we always have to. But this is one where we kind of look at it a little bit differently. And with this being our first year, now that we have KPIs to track for social, for TV, et cetera, we'll build off of that for 2023 and beyond.
Yeah, that's great. And hopefully that's encouraging to any sponsorship sales folks who are on this call who may say like, hey, my property doesn't have the scale of the NFL or the Golden State Warriors or ESPN. Like we can never reach as many eyeballs as properties or media or entertainment properties like those can. But hopefully the encouragement is, hey, like sometimes brands may just want the story and the opportunity for engagement and being able to really deeply integrate with your property to kind of tell a story in a really deep and unique way like US Bank has done, and very authentic as well with kind of what your company is, what your brand stands for, and then how you're using it in a way that's appropriate to the sports and the athletes. But that said, I think sometimes we may, from a property standpoint, may underestimate the scale and reach that we do have, and even if we don't underestimate it, certainly some of our prospective brand partners might underestimate the reach that they have access to through a tier 2 or below sports property. So Cory, why don't you address that and talk about with MILB and with USL, how do you communicate scale and show like, hey, you actually do have access to a much broader fan base and more eyeballs than maybe a property or a brand prospect might expect.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And I think it's an interesting one where it could go a number of ways. I think one, in the traditional sense, like reach and scale, I think we talked about, we'll have 40 plus professional teams on the men's side. On the women's side, we'll continue to grow at a similar pace. And so when you look at it, there could be 70, 80 clubs by the World Cup by 2026 that in certain markets are the only professional soccer club in their market, or the only professional organization in their market. So when you think about reach and scale, it's one thing on the club side. The other reach and scale I think is interesting when we look at is the ownership and the type of individuals and their kind of offshoot businesses. That could be one, makes sense for like a bank type of thing that provides reach and scale. The other unique thing about USL and the reach and scale is with these clubs coming in, they're coming in with hundreds of $1 million mixed real estate development where the stadium is the anchor, but it's basically the community front porch. So in terms of business development, there's a lot of opportunities to get on the front side for the stadium development. I think another reach and scale that's interesting is how do you activate players? I think a lot of leagues are obviously witnessing and investing in the fact that the amplification of player content goes much further than the club and then certainly the league content. So working with organizations that can kind of simplify that distribution to augment, the scale and reach of content is interesting. But I think it also goes back to Dan, just kind of that model where for USL, a brand can come in and identify 10 to 12 markets that are important and kind of it's all streamlined through the league office. So it's one thing to have reach and scale, but I'll repeat again, it's another thing to actually, how do you activate and harness that ecosystem to deliver against the brand objective? So that integrated sales model is just one example of how you can kind of demonstrate and execute against it.
Yeah. That reminds me of how we first met when I was working at GMR and managing GMR's partnership with Esurance. And you were at MILB, and Esurance had recently signed a national deal with Major League Baseball. And you guys came in from the minor league side, just saying, hey, like this is an opportunity to extend the reach, to own baseball, and to hit a different audience and do it in a more localized way through your MLB partnership. So more of a complement to the partnership to help make that one even more effective, but also reach a different audience through MILB. And I think the attractive thing there was the 140 plus clubs nationally, the chance to activate in local priority markets, and then to leverage that. So each individual team or club may not have enormous social digital followings, but in aggregate with a national platform, it does. And so the reach and scale was there, but also the local engagement kind of in some priority markets. And that was really successful. And I imagine that's similarly how you guys are approaching things at USL.
Yeah, I know we kept you up at night trying to monitor that many clubs activations, the call up worthy, but I think you're exactly right. It's the aggregate and the consistency and streamlined nature of how that's formed. But also, you bring up a good point, the unduplicated audience that
Yep.
complements what you're already reaching. I think, for emerging properties, I think that's an important exercise to go through, of how you can go to a brand and be like, you can reach this new audience, or double down and reach it in new markets in new ways.
Yep. Yeah, and that's something that we do a lot in my current role at FloSports. So for those who aren't familiar, we're a direct-to-consumer sports subscription-based sports media streaming and content platform, similar to an ESPN Plus, but we really focus in what we call underserved sports. So sports that are kind of in a tier 2 and below category that aren't getting coverage from the ESPNs and the Foxes and from a network standpoint or from a digital content standpoint. But what we do have is an unduplicated audience, like you mentioned. And so a stat that we use frequently is the percentage of our audience that aren't regularly visiting some of the top sports media platforms like ESPN, Fox, Bleacher Report, Yahoo, USA Today. And as of now, it's about 71% of our regular audience hasn't visited any of those top 10 sports media platforms in the past 30 days. And so it really shows prospective brand partners like, hey, these are highly engaged, passionate fans, about 78% of which say that they want to support brand partners who help their sports grow. And you're not reaching them if you're spending with a top level sports league or on a top sports media platform. And the scale is there as well. We certainly don't have the scale of an ESPN.com, but we cover about 25 different sports and in aggregate average about 6 million unique users on our platform on a monthly basis and about 40 million annually. And so there is still a scale to be talked about, and it's with an audience that's not duplicated. And so that's kind of how we position ourselves. And I imagine, it's similar in your world. Why don't we talk about, we've been talking about ourselves a lot, and it's been really great, but why don't we talk about what we're kind of seeing in the industry at large? Jen, why don't you start us off, and maybe who is either a rights holder of a sport that you would call an emerging sport or a fast growing sport that's doing really well with activating brands, kind of top level blue chip brands, or on the other side, maybe a brand that you've seen that like, hey, they're really doing a great job of activating kind of in this kind of tier 2 and below sports world?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say AT&T, not just because they're a fellow changemaker partner, but they have this platform that's called She's Connected. And their idea was to increase visibility of women athletes, not just WNBA, but golfers, soccer players, etc., and highlighting what they're doing on and off the court. So their small businesses they might run, their side hustles, their parenting at home lifestyles, and then they're on the court thing and showing what they do holistically. And I think as a sponsorship of the WA and women athletes, that's something that we've kind of started leaning into of, how can we help holistically these female athletes, but how can we also spotlight them? And I think AT&T has done a really, really nice job of pulling together different women athletes from different sports that maybe don't get the coverage that men's sports do, and highlighting all that goes into being an athlete in their specific sport and everything that goes into their lives outside of the sport as well. So I would say I think AT&T has done a very nice job, and Visa's done a good job as well, but AT&T is the one that strikes home with me the most.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And we just propped another poll question up for the audience. Curious among these, what's an emerging sports league that you think is going to impact the North American sports industry the most over the next decade? So put your answers in there. And if you have others that you think that aren't included on this list, there certainly are lots of others that are really making noise in the industry. Drop those in the chat too. Would love to see from the audience kind of who's on your radar in terms of leagues that are really making an impact on the industry. Cory, I'll shoot that over to you as well. What's a rights holder or a brand that you think is doing a really good job of activating top level partnerships kind of in the emerging sports space?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would go back to Jen's earlier point on AT&T, and just a few through lines for me is one, the continued influence of athletes in kind of that next generation consumer attachment and engagement with that player. More so what's happening off the pitch, court, ice, or playing surface, I think is an interesting one. And then how you can leverage your platform to provide visibility, in this case, specifically the women's sports. So I love that platform. I'll have to check that one out. I think for me, one that kind of stands out, and it might be a little bit of both, but one that caught my eye was Anheuser-Busch buying a franchise for Major League Pickleball. I'm fascinated and curious how that will come to life, but the basic premise of how you can plug in the Major League Pickleball franchise into this kind of Anheuser-Busch flywheel to develop content, to leverage the players for, to promote different portfolio brand offerings, to have control over the partners that they work with and integrate with, a little bit of a Red Bull model. But I think that one is really interesting to me. And I think with emerging sports properties, it might be a little bit more of an advantage in this case, where it's not a $7 billion takeover or acquisition, but something that could be interesting for other properties. As I told AB's agency, like Artois FC has a really nice ring to it. So we're definitely like kind of thinking in creative ways, but I think it goes to show again the innovation of a prominent blue chip brand, but then also kind of reimagining what a partner experience and partnership could look like. So that one stood out to me.
Awesome. Looks like the audience agrees with you. 64% say Major League Pickleball is going to disrupt the industry the most over the next decade. So yeah, thanks for sharing that one. I'm going to cheat a little bit and share one from my own experience, but one is on the brand side is Castrol, obviously motor oil brand, and one that's spent at a pretty high level in NASCAR and the English Premier League and done some pretty significant partnerships, but recently did a partnership, I guess maybe a year or two ago now, with FloSports on our motorsports racing side, and we had a kind of a dirt track racing is something that I knew nothing about before taking this job, but it's just this massive kind of sports network, mostly in the Midwest, but we do a lot in that space with streaming events and showcasing coverage and went to Castrol, obviously an endemic brand to that space and racing, and they helped us create this brand new series that was basically giving the same level of support to or kind of creating a brand new series where drivers could do races kind of in the middle of the week and then tie it in with doing them in small towns and communities nearby where big NASCAR races were happening. And so the idea was it gives drivers a chance to compete during the week. They don't have to compete all the time during the weekend, on the weekends. But then the other benefit of that is it gives NASCAR drivers who just really love kind of small town grassroots like dirt track racing as just a personal passion, even though it's not the same, doesn't create the same opportunity financially or in terms of celebrity as driving for NASCAR, but wanted just to be able to do it for fun, could have the chance to travel to wherever they were going to be competing in a NASCAR race on that Sunday, take a pit stop in a small town nearby and compete in kind of this dirt track event. And so that really helped grow the sport by bringing some of the big names and big drivers and increase the purses and things like that. And so a brand that was already kind of endemic to the sport, it was a natural fit, but also really helped the sport grow and thrive. And we know, as in most sports, but especially in motorsports, brand partners who support the sports, help them grow, get a lot of just positive affinity from fans. And so that's one that I've been exposed to before, even happened before I even started, but have been exposed to and kind of seen the results of. Last question for the group, and Jen, you can start us off. and then we'll turn it over to any questions from the audience. We love audience questions, so please be thinking of those here in the next few minutes and drop some of those in the chat. But Jen, from where you sit, what advice or encouragement would you give to, actually I'll ask you a two-part question. What advice or encouragement would you give to a sponsorship salesperson who's thinking like, man, I really want to be able to target a big brand like a US bank, but I just don't know if I have the chops or if my organization has what it takes to kind of get a brand like that on board. Like, how would you encourage someone in that position?
So I would say to start, do your research. So for example, if you're a brand and you already have a financial partner or there's some kind of conflict of interest, then that's not going to be worth your time because there's going to be competing clauses there. But secondly, I would say figure out what they stand for. So example, if someone was going to pitch US Bank and there was no competing issue, I would say do your research on what does US Bank invest in communities typically. What type of community platforms do we invest in? And kind of build your pitch around that. And then once you're meeting with that brand, listen to them. And I know that sounds very basic, but I cannot tell you how many times I've sat in pitches and I have said what is important to our brand or what we're looking for. And the next time I meet with a partner, it's like I never said the words. It didn't resonate at all. And they're just like, well, but here's how much we can give you media wise. And it's like, but that's not what we said that we're interested in. So I would say listen to what the brand is telling you and then tailor the package to them. And especially nowadays, as we've kind of spent this entire call talking about, brands are willing to spend money on more altruistic causes versus just the impressions. So take the time to learn what is important to that brand and build the package around it. And to what Cory said, athletes and how they're using all of their platforms right now, we're just on the beginning cusp of what leagues can use their athletes for and how brands can use them. So I would say that's another piece to hone in on.
Yeah, that's great. I think, attention to objectives, doing your research, kind of understanding what the brand stands for, and then, really being strategic and creative with how you kind of integrate yourself into that as a rights holder, I think is all really great advice. And then second part of that question is if there's any folks here who, like you, work for a brand or work for an agency, and they're kind of think like, oh, I only want to spend with like big four, big five professional sports. Like, what would you say to them around like, hey, there actually are some really cool opportunities that you may not be thinking about?
I would say they have to shift their focus. They need to be clear with themselves of what their definition and their goal is, but then rethink about it. Like I mentioned at the very beginning of the call, when this opportunity, the W, was first brought to us, I was very skeptical about it. And then once we started going down the platform of it, I remember saying to my manager, are we going to sign on to this and then like lose our jobs like in a year because we don't have the recording and all the information that we need for our management committee to sell this? But we all got on board and we all then understood what we were going to do and shifted our focus from having to have those impressions and those spots and dots, et cetera, to say, okay, we're going to get literally like 8 different departments in the bank to come together to help us with this sponsorship, from our community group to work with our nonprofits, from our educational group to educate these athletes, to our PR group, et cetera. And we really then also built a great collaborative story at how the bank has different departments that work together. So we were able to sell a different story to our upper management. And I mean, it has literally changed how they look at sponsorships. So I would say that is a way of like, people need to also shift their focus on exactly what they think a sponsorship is in their company.
No, that's great advice. And Cory, similar for you, what would you say to someone who is in a similar role to you or working for a rights holder that wants to go after big brands and kind of best approach for doing that?
Yeah, before answering that, I'll just riff a little bit more on what Jen just alluded to. And I think the opposite is true as well for the rights holder, is you have to de-risk the investment. Everyone's being pressed on investment and every dollar spent. But especially for emerging sports properties, it's tough internally at the brand to push through. So I think one tactic is, and maybe applies here too, is leverage and show the team behind the team, similar to what Jen just alluded to, of getting the financial people involved, getting the HR team involved, getting all of these departments involved. The rights holder needs to do that too during the sales process of getting the people in HR crew, the creative team, the social team, the operations team, player welfare, because then you can show that the full weight of this organization is being leveraged to enable this partnership to be successful. And I think that provides a lot of trust and a lot of confidence on the other side of the table. But also on the flip side, you just heard Jen, there's a lot of people thinking about the WNBA partnership within the walls of US Bank. And that's a really important thing. So from a tactics and encouragement side, I like the way Jen approached it, and I'll do the flip side of, even before you're doing the outreach, is like, how do you get your own house in order? And sports continues to be an incredible vehicle for brands to deliver value. And so two questions that I would ask your commercial team and maybe other departments is, what does success look like? Aside from revenue, is it marketing activation? Is it community impact? Aligning with X number of category brands. I think that's really important. And then the second one is really leaning into, what can your property do for brands and partners better than anyone else? And I think that was a really good exercise to pressure test some assumptions, but also maybe create some new ones to get some other feedback from departments. Because then you can reverse engineer and probably through that exercise approach US Bank in a very thoughtful way. And obviously doing all the things that Jen talked about of research and listening. So I kind of flipped it on its head a little bit of just kind of getting your own house in order. But those two questions to really identify what your commercial value proposition is important.
Yeah, I love that. What does success look like, and what can your property do differently than others? And I think that aligns well with kind of what Jim was saying around doing your research, understanding the brands and kind of what success looks like for them. And that I think helps with your prospecting. If it's like, all right, this is how we're differentiated. This is how we can help a brand tell its story differently. This is how we can help them reach an unduplicated audience, like we talked about, like who are the brands that may be interested in that, and we may provide a solution to a problem that they're trying to solve for. So I think that all connects together really well. Two questions from the audience. Hopefully we have time for both. And if we have others, we can do our best to get to them. And this one, it's about the pandemic. And I'll ask both of you about this. Cory, I can't remember if you were at USL during the pandemic or kind of when you made that transition. And then Jen, I know you guys hadn't officially started the partnership at the beginning of the pandemic, but maybe it still had some effects. But the question says, how did you adjust your strategy during the pandemic with the uncertainty of games and then the reduced capacity of games as well?
So we had not fully signed on to the W during the pandemic or pre-pandemic. I can answer that from an overall US Bank sponsorship strategy. Like I mentioned, we work really closely with all of our partners, mutually beneficial agreements. We worked with them to come up with make goods. So for example, we have a couple football teams that you guys might know that we partner with. They couldn't have fans in the stands, right? For most of the season, they could have very limited amount of fans. So then the viewership of all of your in-arena signage, your IPTV, et cetera, it goes down the tank. So we worked with them to say, what does it look like that we can get make goods in other creative ways to still kind of benefit the sponsorship? So for example, one of our NFL teams we partner with, and restaurants really struggled during the pandemic because most of them in many states were closed. So we worked with one partnership to say, let's do a event where we let different restaurants apply for this, what we called a boost program. And we had them write in an essay about why they could use X amount of money to help their restaurant, deliver the food to different area residents, et cetera. So we still got great PR out there. We gave gift cards and dollar amounts to these restaurants in that local city. Still got our name and PR out there, but we also helped the restaurant and the residents in that area. So we worked to get very creative to find ways to do make goods. We did not ask any partner during the pandemic for any refunds or anything, which is something I'm very proud of the bank for doing.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That was an interesting time, and yeah, maybe not always fun to reflect back on, but yeah, I appreciate you kind of giving that insight. And then Cory, what about for you? How did the pandemic kind of affect your approach with what you were doing day to day?
Yeah, I'm the one who decided to transition jobs during the pandemic. So that was a transition in and of itself. I would say it reinforced our club's community standing, and so we understood the times that were very difficult, and so we actually leveraged our partnerships to drive more community impact and reallocate dollars for food donations, shelter, housing, masks, all those kind of equipment that people were just having a really difficult time with. So that was one aspect, but then there was also, we went through a lot of stages during the pandemic, but there was also this need of kind of this form of levity. And we're all about fun, and then we're all about kind of soccer and uniting communities. So kind of trying to infuse where possible and understand where our positioning is in marketplace of providing entertainment through the form of digital and social, AR, and other mechanisms, just knowing that we couldn't be there together physically. So really getting creative with our partners to kind of do that. And I think that will, obviously, we see it today, continue as a trend to increase reach and scale, but also engagement for new audiences.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, as difficult as the pandemic was, definitely some learnings from that I think are still being applied even today. One last question. Oh, two questions. I think I only have time for one, so let me make a quick decision on which one we're going to go with. This one says, question for Jennifer. So we're going to put you on the spot. Lots of sponsorships come your way. How do you filter through all of these pitches, and what do you look for in order to consider an opportunity? Do you send them to your agency to vet potential partnerships? So lots of pitches that come your way. How do you filter kind of what's the best opportunities, and then how maybe do you leverage an agency to help you with that?
Yep. So I'll answer it in reverse. So only send the agency very, very high level pitches, because we get so many pitches every single day. We have a specific sponsorship strategy at the bank that so any sponsorship has to pass through multiple different criteria pieces, from if it's the right pillar, are they a customer, are they in a state we're in? A lot of times we get pitches from states that we're actually not in. And so we look at all of that. We have a very comprehensive ROI document that if a sponsorship gets past the first stage, that we would then work on filling out and figure out if the ROI is there, which is an example of how, to my earlier point, the W, we weren't as focused on the spots and dots like we were with other smaller sponsorships. So that, and then being completely honest, it comes down to funding. If we have funding to look at any new opportunities, because honestly, there's times where we don't. So if we're maxed out budget-wise for the year, then it's a sponsorship that we might look at in the future, but we're not going to look at right then and there.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, thanks for, I know lots of folks are probably always wondering, like, what happens on the brand side when I send this over? What does their process look like? And then when it's with the agency, what does that mean? And kind of how does all that work together? So yeah, I appreciate you kind of giving some insight there. I think we're about at time at the hour mark. So Cory, Jen, again, really appreciate you guys making the time. Hopefully our audience had lots of great takeaways around, how do you tell your story? How do you differentiate? How do you find the right ways to kind of find touch points with a brand and tell your story with them in a unique way? And then from a brand standpoint, like, what does it mean to work with an emerging sports property? Where are the opportunities, and how can you really accomplish your business objectives in that way? So again, really appreciate you guys making the time. I learned a lot. I was taking notes as we were going. And yeah, thanks again to you guys, to the audience, and to the NSF for letting us do this. And turn it back over to Ron to close us out.
Hey, thank you, Dan, Cory, Jennifer. That was awesome. Thank you so much for doing that. And we hope everybody got a lot, learned some insights, some takeaways from today's webinar that you can take back to your organization. Some great questions there. And I mean, I had jotted some down and you guys touched them all. So kudos to all of you guys. Thank you so much for doing that. Now, for everybody out there, like I said, we hope we'll see you at our next webinar, Tuesday, December 20th. That'll be at 10 a.m. Pacific, 11, 12, 1 o'clock Eastern. Or certainly we hope to see you live at the forum coming up in Los Angeles, February 26th to the 28th. Now, for those of you that are coming out, obviously, I want to make a pitch. If you're familiar with the forum, you're part of the forum family, then you probably know about the NSF Sammy Awards and the Achievement Awards. The Achievement Awards are the best advertising in 8 categories in sports, and the Sammy is your best marketing idea of the year. So the entry window is open now for both of those and will stay open until December 16th. So if you want to get more information on them, stop by the website at www.sports-forum.com. Or shoot Melody a note at Melody, Melody. She's been our producer today. And she's at sports-forum.com because this is what the forum's all about, is getting some great ideas together, just getting people together to talk about what's working, even what's not working. I mean, we learn from our mistakes, we learn from our successes. So we're awfully excited to be back and to be having post-COVID, talking post-COVID, hopefully getting a chance to see everybody back in Los Angeles coming up here in February. So with that said, again, thank you to our 3 wonderful panelists, and thank you to all of you for joining us today. We're excited to see everybody coming up here, and hopefully we'll see you at our next webinar on December 20th. Bye, everybody. Have yourself a great rest of the week. Take care now. Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.